Greetings, this is Hear Her Sports, the female athlete podcast, and I'm Elizabeth Emery. Today's guest is professional adventure athlete Liz Sampey. She explores the world by bike, ski, pack raft, and whatever else is necessary. All this started when she quit her job to make a movie in Iceland. In addition to that trip, she's recently explored Guatemala, Peru, Alaska, and Puerto Rico. She's also a doctor of physical therapy, a coach, and a writer. In our conversation, Liz is honest and open about her fears and limitations. For example, with no shame, she calls herself a slow packer. We also talk about how expeditions fit into her life, what is home, how she creates consistency, even though she never really knows where she's off to next, her fierce commitment to her own growth, and her amazing new project, Rise Aligned, bringing movement and mindfulness to young people. Lately, I've been thinking about the meaning of adventure, so I took a great deal from talking to Liz. I'm also excited to soon share another episode where adventure shows up again, but in really different and also in really similar ways. But meanwhile, let's get started and meet Liz Sampey. You're so full of adventures that it's really exciting for me that you made time to talk. So welcome and thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. This is really exciting. I'm very excited to chat with you. I love your podcast. So,
thanks. And thanks for reaching out and tagging me on some of your posts recently. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So you describe yourself as a professional adventure athlete. What does that mean and what does it look like?
What does that mean? That's a good question. So for me, adventure sports are things like, mountain biking, rock climbing, pack rafting, things like that in the mountains. And so what I spend most of my time doing is creating my own multi-sport expeditions around the world, and then I get support for them through sponsors. And so my main sports are mountain biking or bike packing or fat biking, and then I combine that with backcountry skiing or ski mountaineering, sometimes alpine running, sometimes pack rafting. And so, I just dream up these trips and I do them all around the world.
Cool. That is so cool. So you do all those different sports. Mm-hmm. One of the quotes that I really like was, I was quitting my job and going to Iceland to be in a movie.
Yeah. That was my first foray into the expedition world. That was in 2015.
I know. And that was such an exciting story. I really recommend everybody go read that, just about how you had made the decision to leave.
Yeah. It was a pretty crazy time, but I feel like that had been kind of coming. I had been getting the feeling that it was time to shift in my life. And when that opportunity presented itself, I couldn't say no. So I jumped.
Did it feel like a big decision, or was it just so easy because it just felt so right?
That's a good question. Yes and yes. I mean, it felt so right for sure. So it was an easy decision in that aspect. I couldn't really ignore everything that my gut was telling me. But at the same time, I picked up my entire life. I had a job in Crested Butte. I was working as a physical therapist full-time in my off season from racing, and then just, kind of limited during the season. And I had a boyfriend. I had a house that I was renting, and I basically had the perfect life, by anybody's standards. I really had it made. And Crested Butte, Colorado is an amazing town. I was racing. I was fully supported for racing. And so picking up and leaving all of that was definitely a really big decision. But at the same time, it was like I couldn't not do it,
What was the attraction of making that decision?
Well, so the biggest thing about going to Iceland to ride for this film was just really kind of opening my eyes to what was possible. So the filmmaker, Anthony, who his company is called First Tracks Productions, he just had this idea to make this film about fat biking and how, it's revolutionizing the bike industry, and you can use it to go places that normal mountain bikes couldn't take you. And he just had this idea to dream up this project for this video, to take athletes around the world to ride in these beautiful places. And he got it supported and he made it happen. And it just kind of made me realize, like, holy crap, like the sky's really the limit, just creativity and learning some skills and just going for it. So for me, that was the biggest shift, and the biggest thing that catalyzed out of that trip was just that kind of world of infinite possibility. And so, since then I've been designing my own expeditions and executing them, getting sponsor support for those. It kind of kicked off my speaking career. So I do public speaking all over the place, and I write for magazines, and just kind of catalyzed my entire life trajectory as it is now. So yeah, it was pretty big.
You touched on so many questions that I have for you, but let me ask you. So has it turned out to be what you expected? And if so, how? And if not, how come?
Well, I think the craziest thing and the most important thing really is that I went into it without any expectations. I had no idea. I just knew that it was the next right thing to do.
When you design your adventures, what are you looking for now, both physically and also metaphorically, I guess? And because I know that that's something that you think about based on reading your website.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I design my adventures kind of just as they come to me. Like this recent one, it was just an idea that popped into my head while I was driving. And, I really do look for places where I can do multiple things that I love. I mentioned all the different types of adventure sports that I like to combine, and that's pretty much anywhere you can do that stuff. So yeah, I get an idea and I start piecing together a route. And so physically, it's just all the things that I love to do, just incorporating that into the entire trip. And then, for me, adventure is really a catalyst for every other area of my life, personal growth in my career, or my business, or my relationships. And I learn so much about myself and about the world when I'm out there. And, it really doesn't take much to achieve that wherever you go. So yeah, every adventure is similar in those ways, physically challenging, mentally and emotionally challenging, and a learning experience, but, just a little different depending on the different sports that I'm utilizing when I'm out there.
Right. So talk a little bit about the trip that you just got back from.
So I just completed a circumnavigation of Puerto Rico on as much coastline as I could string together. And I took a fat bike from Fatback. So Fatback Bikes, based out of Alaska, has been a longtime sponsor of mine, and they've been amazing. And they gave me a bike for this trip. And fat tires have a lot of flotation. Most people think about them for snow, but they're also great for sand. And so I was riding on the beaches and stringing together as much beach and coastline as possible. I also took a pack raft from Kokopelli, and it's like a real small, like almost inflatable kayak thing that you can roll up, and I put it on the handlebar roll of my bike. And so when I would come to river crossings, I would inflate the pack raft and put the bike on the pack raft and paddle across the river to the other side. So that way I wouldn't have to go inland to try to find roads to cross the river on. And then I also did some paddling sections out in the ocean, which was funny. I mean, first time I tried to launch my pack raft in the surf with my bike on it was just ridiculous. And I looked like a beached whale trying to jump in there and paddle out before the next wave took me down. So that's, I did a lot of paddling stretches on the ocean, which was a little scary because I'm not an ocean person. I'm not real familiar with that stuff. But I did it, and I was camping along the way just on the beach. There's a lot of beautiful secluded beach in Puerto Rico, so I would make camp. And then I also have friends on the island, so I stayed with a couple friends along the way as well. And the biggest point of the trip was not so much the expedition itself, but I was also there helping some friends with some hurricane relief work that they've been doing, and just trying to bring awareness to the situation in Puerto Rico that's still happening 6 months after Hurricane Maria blew through. So that's kind of the nutshell version of that.
Right. Again, my God, I have so many questions. So tell me a little bit about what you saw in Puerto Rico and sort of maybe what stood out as the work that needs to be done still.
So the thing that really surprised me is a lot of people in the coastal towns, like even the really touristy towns like Rincon, which is a world-renowned surf town, don't have basic things like power and water still. I stayed with a friend who owns a yoga, surf, adventure retreat, hostel type thing. And her place was completely destroyed by the hurricane. And she and her partner have rebuilt it, but she still doesn't have any water. So she can't really run her business. And the fact that this is happening 6 months after was just crazy to me. I knew that up in the mountains, in the remote areas, some of this was going on, but I didn't expect to see it in the tourist towns and in the more populated areas along the coast. And the other thing that was really eye-opening is just that aspect of people aren't able to run their businesses. A lot of Puerto Rico's economy was based on tourism, And because of that, their savings are running out. They're running out of money. They're not able to give people jobs, so people that work for them can't work. And a lot of people are or have already taken off to the U.S. so that they can find work. And it's pretty sad because that's their home. Latin culture is very home and family and community oriented. And a lot of families and communities have been split up by some of them having to go to the U.S. to find work, whereas others are staying to try to rebuild life in Puerto Rico. So the biggest thing right now that I saw that was eye-opening is just the fact that a lot of people can't run their businesses, a lot of people can't work. So, Puerto Rico really does need tourism right now for sure. And it's still an amazing, beautiful place. And, the people that come just need to be a little understanding of the situation that's still happening there and maybe do what they can to help if they're traveling to the area.
Right.
But this is the longest blackout in U.S. history. I mean, the town of Isabela, I was driving through there. I have a friend that lives there, and he and I were driving down there at night when I was visiting him, and the entire town is black. People are running their lights on generators. And so I don't know what it would take to get the power and the water running, but that's kind of the basic step,
Right. I can't even imagine living with no water and power for 6 months.
Oh, it's crazy. People are getting sick from drinking contaminated water. I have a friend that had water for about 3 days and it was brown.
Right.
So yeah, it's difficult, and there's a lot more plastic bottle consumption than there ever was down there.
Sure.
And so that's becoming an issue as well, and not having the resources to deal with that. And yeah, it was a pretty eye-opening experience being there. And I was there a year ago as well, so I got to see it before the hurricane and then after.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And you did this trip solo.
Mm-hmm.
So what's it like for you to do these solo trips? And do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah. So this was actually my first solo expedition.
Oh,
so
okay.
I've done a lot of travel solo, but this was, and a lot of like obviously shorter things solo, big mountain bike trips or ski days or whatever, but this was my first kind of larger scale expedition that I've ever done solo. And everybody that I met, was like, oh, it's dangerous. Aren't you afraid? And how do you do all this stuff on your own? How do you carry all this stuff? And really the answer is no, I'm not afraid. I mean, everybody that I've met has been just incredible to me. Has taken me in. The people that I rode by that were doing the construction on the power lines or the underground lines, would hand me up cold bottles of water and give me fruit and, things like that. And, things can happen anywhere for sure. I'm certainly not stupid. I don't go wandering down the back alleys of San Juan by myself at night, these types of things. But yeah, whenever I'm traveling alone, I just use the same precautions that I would when I'm here in the U.S. and, nothing bad has ever happened. And I just meet wonderful people all over the world. And I really like doing the expedition solo because everything depends on me. Everything that goes right, everything that goes wrong, everything going through my head, all the decisions I make, it's just me. And, that was a different experience for me on expedition. So yeah, it was really interesting and fun.
Do you think that your sense of who you are and your sense of identity has changed doing these big adventures, and particularly now that you've done this one solo, like being able to take care of yourself and knowing that you can do it?
Yeah. And it's something that I've built over the years. I've always kind of had this adventure lifestyle, and I started playing in the big mountains of Colorado when I was 17. I moved to Colorado immediately after graduating high school, and first thing I did is took an Avi 1 course and learned about backcountry avalanches and started playing in the mountains. And so I've been building this over time, and for me that's been the biggest thing, is just building these skills and this confidence gradually. And I forget who said this. I think it was maybe Tony Robbins or something, but it's the quote is, confidence is the memory of past successes. So, each time that I have even a little success, I take that and I hold on to it, and I file it away and I build on it. And I've certainly had my share of failures as well. And doing these big expeditions tests me in every single way. And, whether when you're doing them with a partner and you've got that relationship dynamic as well with a teammate, that's potentially difficult, and you find out who you are when you're interacting with another person in those environments. And man, when you're by yourself and something goes wrong and the only thing you can do is look in the mirror, like, yeah, you really found out who you are. the biggest thing for me that I've learned overall is that, I'm a person that is fiercely committed to my own growth in every way. And, I keep that in mind every time I'm out there and I slip up and I'm like, all right, I'm growing, I'm learning, I got this.
Do you have an example of a test from this recent trip?
Oh my God. Yeah. So the first day, I'm working out the kinks or whatever in my system, and I'm a really tiny person. I'm barely 5'2", and so I have a really tiny bicycle. And because of that, when I'm traveling by myself, I have to put everything on my tiny bicycle's frame. So, the tent, the stove, my pack raft, my paddle, my clothes, everything is on my bike. And so for me, the adjustment of all of my gear takes some time to dial in, and it's a little different with every trip. So on day one, I'm riding along and I'm, having to stop a lot to adjust my gear because something's rubbing on the tire or the bike's handling funky because I've got the weight distributed wrong or whatever. And it took me a while. Oh gosh. And then I lost my sandal. I don't bring very much stuff or whatever. And I'm pedaling in running shoes in flat pedals, and I had these sandals strapped to the back of my bike, and I lost one. And I noticed, and I was like, oh no, I am not losing my sandal on a beach ride on day one. So I went all the way back, like 12 miles.
Oh man.
To find the sandal. Oh my gosh, and it was like, really? And so I turn around and I'm riding, and I'm finally on the coast, and I'm finally making some time. And I'm like, I just want to ride forever, And when I'm on my bike and I'm moving, I love it. So I'm riding, and I've passed this camp spot, or this thing that would make this amazing camp spot. And I look at it and I'm like, oh man, this is it, But then I looked at my watch and it was 4:30, and I was like, I got like 2 more hours I could ride before I really have to make camp. And so my ambition got the best of me, and I kept going. And I looked at my map, and I plan these trips kind of as I go, just looking at Google Earth. I use an app called Gaia GPS, to plan, to look at topos, things like that. And I kind of had my eye on this area of beach that I was like, okay, I could get there within an hour and set camp or whatever. So I kept going, and I get to this area, and it turns out this area was a national park, and it was gated off. And I arrived there at about 6:00 p.m. and everything was locked up. And, it was an area that was kind of more of a touristy town. So there were, the hotels and the golf courses and things like that. And so there wasn't a lot of just like secluded beach to camp on, which would have been fine if I had more daylight, but I was running out. And just then the skies unleashed and it started pouring rain on me. And it was dark and it was raining. And I was like, you have to be kidding me, What am I going to do? So I had nothing to do but keep going. I had a headlamp, but it wasn't like a really massive one. It wasn't very robust. It was just like a regular headlamp. But I put it on, and at that point, I can't ride on the coast because there's fencing. And so I'm on the road, and it's pretty busy, and I'm cruising along. And I was just like, I got nothing to do but ride. So kept going. And then after about an hour, I decided I was going to stop for a beer at a tienda, which is at like a little gas station. And yeah, I've been riding all day, and I was like, I just want to
stop for a beer.
Yeah, I was like, I just want a nice cold beer right now. Like, I got, I want to like figure out my next move while I'm sipping a beer. And, so I pull over and I'm sopping wet. It's like, in Puerto Rico, when it rains. And I'm just drenched. So I go into this tienda, I leave my bike against the window so I can see it. I get a beer. I go outside, I sit down on the, the little like walkway or whatever, and I just crack my beer. I'm drinking it, and it's still pouring on my head. And I really had this moment where I was like, oh, I'm such a screw up. Like, why didn't I stop earlier? Why didn't I tie my sandal down to my bike better? Like, why didn't I dial in my equipment before day one? Why didn't I, whatever, like all of those things. And I've certainly had moments in my life where I've kind of succumbed to that like negative spiral of thinking and, just letting myself get into this negative thought pattern. But I learned through racing that doesn't serve me ever. Like nothing good ever comes out of that. And so I've gotten pretty good. And I did this in this instance. I just stopped myself in my tracks, and I'm like, okay, what's the worst that could happen? What is the absolute worst that could happen right now? And I was like, well, I could get hit by a car and die. Like, okay, that's possible, but is it likely? No. I've got a good headlamp. I'm good at riding on the road. I'm good at getting out of the way. It's probably not going to happen. So what's the worst that could happen? And the thing I came up with was that, okay, if I don't find a camp spot in the dark and in the rain, I'll just keep riding all night. I'll just pedal through the night. And then, in the morning, I'll find a place to sleep. And then I thought, all right, I can do that. I can pedal through the night. I've done it before. This really is not that bad. Like, I'm not screwed. Life doesn't suck. Like, it's really okay. So I sit there, soaking wet. I'm sipping my beer and I'm just happy. I'm like, yep, the life's good. And right about then, this guy comes up to me and he's, I don't know how old he is, 50s maybe. And he asked me in Spanish if I had a place to camp for the night. And I said, nope. So I'm just going to keep riding and figure it out. And he's like, well, my wife and I own a house down the street and we'd love to host you for the night.
Holy cow.
And yeah. And he said, he's like, I'm a cyclist. I love to ride my road bike. I haven't ridden much since the hurricane, but, we'd really love to host you. And I said, okay, sure. Thank you. So I followed him to his house. He drove his van slowly. I followed behind on my bike in the pouring rain, again, still pouring. I could barely see his taillights in front of me. And, we went all the way down to the coast, and his house turned out to be this like beautiful big mansion right on the coast. And before the hurricane, he had used it as both a home and as an Airbnb for big groups to come and stay. And I was so shocked to learn that he still had no power and no water in this like pretty ritzy-ish tourist town, and he just kept apologizing to me for not having water. He's like, I'm sorry. I wish I could give you a shower. I wish, I don't have any water. I don't have any electricity. I'm going to plug in my generator so you can charge your phone and your GPS. And, he gave me this like beautiful suite, and I got to sleep in this nice bed and clean my bike and hang my stuff everywhere and get dry. And it was really eye-opening because it was my first real up-close and personal glimpse of, A, what is still going on in Puerto Rico. And that blew me away. And then B, just the generosity of people, even under these circumstances. He's apologizing to me for not having water.
Right.
So, yeah, that day one, it was like, whew, that was a lot on all levels.
You mentioned that you are good about sort of, like not getting down on yourself for errors of judgment. Mm-hmm. Are you equally good at, celebrating your success? You talked a little bit earlier about sort of noticing your success.
Yeah. That's a great question. Oh, so this is something that I've really had to work on. Through my years of racing, that's really where I've honed all my mental skills that I use in life. And in the success part, I really never focused on until very recently. And, with the, like, obviously, you win a race, you're like, oh, great, I'm standing on a podium, awesome, and that lasts for 5 seconds and then it's over. And I've always been pretty good at saying, okay, what went right during this race? But it wasn't until really recently that I started realizing that, celebrating our successes and really like filing away what we did to win, whether that's literally winning a race or just like winning whatever you wanted to do, is really important. It's even more important than analyzing the things that went wrong. So yeah, just recently in the past, I would say like year or so, I've really been focusing on celebrating successes, even like the really small ones.
So you talked about competing. Did you like competing?
I love it. I love competing. It's so fun.
It's now very different though, what you're doing.
Yeah. I competed for a long time. I started as a road bike racer, and I literally bought a road bike and started racing the next week. And I was just like, where have you been all my life? It was so fun, just so interesting to learn new things. And the strategy of road racing is really fun. I raced road bikes, all different disciplines, started racing mountain bikes, raced all different disciplines of mountain bikes. And I still race some, I focus on like adventure style races, but I only do a few a year. And really what shifted that was Iceland. When I went to Iceland in June of 2015, and I had just come back from a stage race in Guatemala, actually, in March of 2015. And I loved it. It was my first time racing out of the country and loved it. But then, going to Iceland and being in a situation where, with expedition, there's no start and finish. There's no course. Nothing's known, like when my first expedition ended up being in Guatemala, and I didn't even know if it was possible to do it. And same with this one, I'm like, I don't know if I can circumnavigate Puerto Rico on a fat bike. Who knows? And so that was the biggest shift, was like realizing that I love the unknown aspect of expedition, and racing is more known. So, all of a sudden racing became boring to me after seeing that.
That's funny.
Yeah, so I still do it because I still do love it, but it's just not my focus anymore.
Right. When you do these expeditions, you have no timetable?
No, typically not. I mean, sometimes I do. It kind of depends. So my first one in Guatemala, where a teammate and I attempted to fat bike the 5 highest volcanoes in Central America, we had a 3-week time limit on that. And that was because, so I'd been living there in Guatemala that winter, and I was still like very heavily sponsored in racing that year. And so I had commitments back in the US starting April 1st. I was going out for the Pisca stage race. And so, we had that 3-week timetable because I had to get on an airplane and fly to a stage race after the expedition. But I never go anywhere for less than a month, really. So I'm pretty loose with my timetables.
And do you have a sense of, how many miles or hours that you'll ride a day? I mean, you must have sort of some sense of how long it will take.
I do. Yeah. So this trip was interesting. So I'd never really done any beach riding before. And so, I have such a great network of bike riders and adventurers around the world that I've met. And I really, for this trip, tapped into my network for that. My good friend Greg Mattis from Fatback, he's from Alaska. He does beach trips all the time. So he was a really good resource for me. And I asked him, how far can you ride on the sand? And so for this trip, I just kind of estimated like I could probably ride about 30 miles a day if I was consistently on the coastline. And, I knew that there would be some segments where I would have to get on the road because there's just no coastline. It's like cliffs down to the ocean. And so, on those days I was able to put more mileage in. So I kind of had some idea, and I kind of thought, okay, it's probably going to take me somewhere between like 10 days and like 20 days, just depending on how much I want to explore, how much I get lost, if I get blown out to sea in my pack raft, things like that. But I ended up being 14 days on the bike for this expedition. And then, I was in Puerto Rico for a month. So the rest of the time I was doing the hurricane relief work and visiting a couple friends. So yeah, I kind of ended up right in the middle of my estimated time.
And in terms of navigation, do you, like before you get there, do you have some sort of mental map of the geography so that you don't sort of get yourself in trouble thinking, I can go this way and discover that it's a gigantic mountain between point A and point B?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, for the most part, I use all my expeditions I've planned using Google Earth and Gaia GPS. So, on Google Earth is just amazing. It's such a great resource because you can really zoom in and you can see like, I think there might be a trail there, between the trees or whatever. So sometimes I get myself in trouble because I'll check things out and then they don't exist anymore. And then I have to turn around, In Peru, my teammate and I really depended on a lot of local knowledge from, these Incan people that were living in these villages. We were pioneering a whole new bikepacking route through the Andes. And so we looked at Google Earth and we'd plan like a few segments at a time. And, we knew kind of where the little roads were. But then those situations like I was just talking about where you see this tiny little line going across a mountain and you have no idea what it is. You just ride, you hit the village where you can see it from the town and you just ask people, Puedo pasar aquí con bici? Can I pass here with a bicycle? They say yes or no, basically, and then you kind of go from there. So, yeah, yes in a way, Google Earth is really great for that. But then there are some times when you get somewhere and you realize that it's just not happening, and you do have to turn around, and that kind of sucks, but it's part of the game.
Right.
Yeah.
So other than navigation and looking at Google Earth, how do you prepare for your trips?
I figure out what sports I'm doing. So, which things I'm going to combine, and the biggest thing is I learn any skills that I don't have that I'm going to need. So for Alaska, the expedition I did there was bike packing and then pack rafting some pretty big Alaskan rivers that included some class 3 whitewater. And I'd never paddled whitewater my entire life. I'm terrified of water. Like deep rushing water is like my mortal fear. I don't know if I drowned in a past life or something. I don't know. I'm so scared of water, and for this expedition, I don't know how this evolved in this way, but our intention was to use a pack raft to do some river crossings, super mellow things. And then all of a sudden it evolved and it morphed, and all of a sudden we're running 6 days of class 3 whitewater. And I was like, oh, what happened? So, for that trip, I had to learn how to run whitewater, and that was scary. And, my teammate and I went to Alaska, and we spent a month there before the expedition, literally learning how to paddle. And I met this amazing woman named Jewel Harrell, who lives up in Alaska in McCarthy, and she's just this incredible pack rafter. She's also my size. So she taught us essentially how to read the river. I didn't even know what an eddy was. I didn't know what holes were. She taught us all of those things, and she was absolutely instrumental in that trip being a success because, I didn't know how to run whitewater otherwise. So, the biggest thing in preparing is, okay, what do I want to do here? What are the things I need to do? What are the skills that I do have that I'll need to put into play here? And then what are the skills that I don't have? What do I still need to learn? So that's the biggest thing. And then also preparation, obviously you talked about the navigation and route finding. I just make sure that I have all the necessary components of gear, that my bike's gearing, maybe I'll change my drivetrain if I'm running like too hard of gears and I'm going to be riding in sand. I really want super easy gears. So I'll change my drivetrain over. Maybe like Peru, I had to pack everything. We were riding up around 16, 17,000 feet, camping around 14, 15,000 feet, and it was freezing. So having to pack all of those layers. And for me, I don't pack quickly. Like I am just one of those people that deliberates like, oh, do I need this? Do I need this? Do I need this? Maybe not. I pack and unpack 15,000 times. So a lot of it is just, dialing in the equipment that I'm going to need for it.
And do you do training like strength or endurance or any of that kind of sort of typical training that you probably did for bike racing?
Mm-hmm. I do. It's different though. Training for adventure is different than training for racing. And so, I used to train with a power meter and do really specific bike workouts, focused on the results I wanted in endurance racing. So now I don't do that. I don't really use any metrics. I have a Garmin where, I can track my heart rate and I'll look at it and be like, oh, cool, but I'm not focused at all on metrics anymore. And, it's more about, again, what do I need to do during this expedition and what skills do I need? So before Alaska, I did a ton of upper body work, like, push-ups. I did, I don't go to gyms really. I don't live anywhere. So it's hard for me to have a gym membership anywhere. And so all my training's body weight specific. I do a lot of plyometrics. I do a lot of high intensity interval training. I run a lot, and that's partially for my expeditions and partially because I have a dog who's, now too old to bike with me. So I run a lot with him and then just a lot of time on the bike. So yeah, I'm basically training all the time. But yeah, it's fun. I love it, and it's basically just anything that I'm going to need to do on that trip. I just incorporate into my training.
Right. Is there anything that we would be surprised about that you need to be a good adventure rider?
Anything? Okay. So, well, maybe this isn't so surprising, but for me, something that has been really important is the ability to eat anything.
Yes.
Yeah. And to eat nothing, honestly. Like, oh, that was really surprising. So I learned that there is just, when you're burning so many calories, you're on the bike all day, there's just no way you're going to put enough back in, to replenish your stores. And my expedition in Guatemala, I was hungry all the time. And as a racer, I was really calculated about what I was putting into my body during races and how many calories and what type of calories and, just like over scientific about it really, because that's what you need to do when you're racing. And, so on this expedition, my body is just wanting calories like every hour because that's what it's used to. And sometimes that's just not realistic because you just can't put that much in and you can't carry that much food. And sometimes in these countries I go to, there's just not a lot of food available. And so I've had to actually train myself to need less on the bike. And then when I do eat, it's just kind of whatever's available. So I've kind of developed this pretty hard, like rock hard iron stomach for just anything. And so that's been really important.
Have you had to eat something that was like just really disgusting for you?
I like pretty much everything. I'm like not very picky when it comes to food. When you eat the same thing all the time, it can become disgusting. So Peru, there were a lot of stretches where we just didn't go through any towns for like 5 or 6 days. And, we didn't have any opportunity to buy food. So we literally lived on quinoa. And my teammate was a vegetarian, so he didn't do this. But I also had canned tuna. And when all you eat is quinoa and canned tuna for every meal for like 6 days, and then you're doing this for like 40 days, that becomes pretty disgusting.
Yeah. Has there been anything that you've eaten in one of your adventures that just you loved?
Well, Puerto Rico, oh man. The food in Puerto Rico is ridiculous. It's so, so good. I had the opportunity to stay with some friends and just some random people. I had this girl who followed me on Instagram contact me and said that she told her old aunt, who's Puerto Rican, what I was doing. And they wanted to host me. They were like, oh, I want to meet her. I want to host her for a night. And so they came down and got me off the coastline, took me to their house in the mountains, and she prepared this like 6-course meal for me and homemade flan.
Oh my God.
And oh my God, yeah, right? Like I couldn't believe it. I was like major big stomach after this. So that was amazing on this trip, just getting home cooked meals pretty often from, friends or random people. That was really fun. Just being able to eat some really good food there.
Yeah, and meet people who live there too.
Oh my gosh, yeah, just really great. People are just great all over the world. They want to feed you, they want to house you, whatever, things like that.
That's so nice.
Yeah.
And when you're cooking for yourself, what do you like to eat? Like, what's your favorite breakfast? I ask people that a lot.
My favorite breakfast is a breakfast burrito, but I rarely make that on expeditions.
That would be a hard expedition food.
Yeah, I know, right? I wouldn't have any room for anything else because of the burrito fillings.
Right.
I'm pretty boring actually on expeditions. I eat instant oatmeal.
Yeah.
It's probably pretty standard, but it does the trick. I do nut mix, like mixed in with oatmeal, so it kind of gives me some of that extra protein, extra fat. Like I try to be good at storing up my calories during breakfast, and then having those stores to be able to ride for the day on.
And how are you training yourself not to eat on the bike? Just by not eating on the bike?
Just by not eating on the bike. Yeah, it sucks. It really sucks. But yeah, just going for, long, like typically for me, like the way I used to be, I can ride for like 2 hours at any intensity and not need food. But then afterwards I'm like, oh, I got to replenish my calories and whatever. And, so I started just going on longer and longer rides with like maybe just a pack of peanuts, and just stretching that little tiny pack of peanuts over a 6-hour bike ride. And, and the biggest thing is for me making sure that I'm mentally sharp, even though I'm depleted in fuel, because, you're mountain biking, you don't want to crash and hurt yourself, and you don't want to make bad decisions. And so, for me, I have to be even more mindful of that when I'm depleted. So it's been training for not eating on the bike, but then also just having that really like consciousness around, okay, I'm not fueled well. I also need to train to be able to ride this kind of terrain when I'm in this state.
I think you've just discovered why I'm not going to do adventure riding.
Yeah. Well, it depends where you go, like Puerto Rico, I had no shortage of food, but like the middle of Peru, I was like, I was definitely depleted. Right. So you just got to pick adventures that, suit your purpose and suit, your needs or your desires.
Right. So this all sounds great. How are you making all of this work? And I'm asking that in a lot of ways, like just the financial aspect, certainly, which I want to start with, but also then I'd like to talk about like logistically, how are you making it work?
Yeah. So financially, I have a pretty diverse stream of incomes, I guess. So my background is I have a doctoral degree in physical therapy. So, for a long time, I was a physical therapist working in traditional healthcare. And that's kind of like, I love that, but I don't love the healthcare system, but I still love teaching movement. I love, helping people connect with their bodies, things like that. So I've taken my expertise in physical therapy and I've brought that into the online coaching world. So, I coach athletes returning from injury. I coach people who are really wanting to achieve optimal wellness. I coach a lot of adventure sport athletes who are both competitive and non-competitive. Some of them are racing and some of them just want to be able to, feel strong and healthy and fit to do whatever adventures they want to do. So, coaching is a lot of it. I write for magazines. I write for different sponsors' websites. So, my writing is a source of income. Sometimes I do like little writing contracts. So like last summer, I was doing some writing for an online magazine, and that included both writing under my name and also like ghostwriting for some companies. So that, my sponsors support me financially. Some of them are product, some of them are financial, some are both. So part of my income comes from that. And gosh, what else? I do mountain bike skills coaching. So I coach for the Ladies All Ride series. I also coach through my own company, Vital Motion. So, coaching mountain bike skills clinics is something I can do whenever I land somewhere. And I've got a good enough network at this point that it's pretty easy for me to pick up coaching work wherever I'm at. Yeah, so those are a lot of income streams. And then, I also sometimes do short-term physical therapy contracts. So lots of things make it work financially.
Right.
And honestly, like, I'm not rolling in the dough, like all these things bring in small amounts of money. And, my expenses are pretty few. I live in a van when I'm in the US. I don't pay rent. I don't pay utilities. I don't have a car payment. Like I live pretty simply. So I'm able to just kind of focus on making enough money to do what I love to do and keep my needs met. And yeah.
Was that an adjustment?
Yeah, it was. But it was something that I've been kind of working towards for quite a while. So I used to be, 7 years ago, I used to be a normal person. I was actually married. I owned a house. So, I had a lot of stuff and my husband and I split up and I moved out and I realized how much crap I had. I was like, where did this stuff come from? And so it's been like 7 years of just paring all this stuff down and, just living more simply all the time. And then, in 2015, when I moved into my van, that was kind of like, all right, I'm already living with pretty minimal expenses and minimal needs. And now it's time to just like really go for it. So, I have these really good friends that actually I'm staying with them right now in Grand Junction that have let me use a corner of their basement to put some things in that I, really didn't want to get rid of. And that's really my only home base is this corner of their basement.
Yeah.
But yeah, everything else is pretty minimal. So it was an adjustment, but it was over the course of a number of years.
Right. Do you have a philosophy about stuff and home and, like how do you view home? What's your definition of home?
I love your questions. So good. So yeah, I mean, I tell people that I live nowhere and I live everywhere at the same time. And it's kind of a funny concept to grasp, but this is something that I've just kind of recently realized is that like I really do feel rooted wherever I am. Yeah, I travel someplace and I completely fall in love with it. And I feel like I'm at home and I feel like I kind of put down little roots wherever I am. But then, I also just have the ability to pick up and leave whenever I want. A lot of people ask me on these expeditions, especially in Puerto Rico, because I was interacting with more people like, oh, are you here on vacation? Are you here on vacation? And at first I was kind of like, yeah, I guess so. Like, I guess, but then after a little while, I'm like, I'm actually not here on vacation. Like, this is just what I do. This is just my life. I just go places and do things, and then I go other places and do other things and whatever. And I really feel like I'm at home anywhere I go. And I love that feeling. I love it.
My guess is that there's very little that's consistent in your life. Is there something that's consistent that sort of grounds you or roots you or maybe that's not even necessary?
Oh, it totally is, actually. So I have a really consistent meditation practice. I have a consistent movement practice that doesn't involve my bicycle. I have a dog, actually, that has traveled with me a lot, and now he's older and he stays with friends more recently. But when I'm in the U.S., he's always with me. Previously, when I traveled a lot, I kind of didn't feel grounded as much, and I would start to feel kind of chaotic at times or overwhelmed and these types of things. And I still experience that on occasion. But, I have these grounding practices that I do just within myself in the space that I'm in and, connecting to the place, connecting to the earth. I mean, the earth is consistent, right? Like I'm always able to stand on the dirt, and I'm always able to breathe, like breathing's consistent, so it's like these really little things that can actually make a really huge difference in feeling grounded wherever you are. So I've really tapped into that over this past year, and that's been pretty amazing.
Have you been meditating consistently for a long time?
No, not a long time. I've kind of used some elements of riding my bike as meditation in the past. Like road biking is really meditative.
Oh, I think it's totally
your
meditative.
Pedal strokes. Oh, it's amazing. Yeah. And you're a cyclist, you get it. Yeah. So that's been a form of meditation for a long time. Mountain biking for me, not so much because it's really dynamic. The terrain's always changing. You have to be really focused on what you're doing. And it's still a state of flow. So in a way it is. But for me, the ability to just literally sit or lay quietly in one place and meditate has been just really developed over this past 6 months, actually. Yeah, it's pretty new, but I just dove right in. I was like, okay, morning and night every day.
Wow.
And yeah, and it's really been pretty life changing actually, and I love it. It's not, I'm not perfect. Like sometimes I'm running in the morning. I wake up too late and I'm like, whatever. But like I always take even just like a little minute to just like check in with myself, like, hey, how'd you sleep? How are you feeling this morning? And just like take some deep breaths. And so even that's a little bit of meditation, even if it's for just like a few minutes. But I typically prefer like 20-ish minutes of meditation and then just like 20-ish minutes of whatever type of movement feels good to me, whether that's like stretching, yoga, dancing, whatever, morning and night.
When did you start seeing results from meditating regularly? Like how many weeks had to pass?
Because of the point I was at in my life, I was going through some pretty intense personal challenges. And because of that, I just dove in super like full on right away. And so it was pretty quick. I mean, it was within like a week. So yeah. And then, the more I did it, the more results I saw. So it can be pretty fast. It's just kind of how it's like anything, like if you decide to learn a new sport or a new skill and you just kind of dabble here and there and you're like, it might take a while. But if you just dive in and you're like, I'm doing this, like you can progress pretty quickly in anything.
Right.
Yeah.
In the bios that you sent me, you mentioned that you're in the process of launching a nonprofit called Rise Aligned. Can you talk a little bit about that? It sounds really exciting.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I love this. I'm so excited. So this is actually, this came to me in a dream on an airplane about 1.5 years ago, on the way back from Peru. And it's based around a couple different things. It's based around the concept of alignment and movement. So as a physical therapist, as a coach, I've taught physical alignment for a long time, moving your body in ways that are the most efficient, the most effective, that's going to prevent injury, things like that. So I've been teaching physical alignment techniques to people for 10 years. More recently, over the past few years, I've really come to realize that alignment works in every single system. So, you create alignment in your body, you create alignment in your mind, with the things you want to accomplish, the skills you need to learn, create alignment in just kind of I guess you could call it your soul, or just, what resonates with who you are, and then creating alignment in your life. So essentially designing your life the way that you feel the most fulfilled, the most inspired, the way that you want to live. And that's different for everybody, right? But I feel like a lot of young people, kind of late high school, early college age kids, don't get this message a lot. They don't learn how to tap into their own intuition. They don't learn how to tap into just the things that they're passionate about, the way that they actually want to live their lives, what they maybe want to create in the world. Everyone asks like, oh, what do you want to do when you grow up? But, what about the question, who do you want to be when you grow up? Who do you want to be now? What do you want to create? And, so that's something that I'm really passionate about in myself and also just in bringing to the world. So, what Rise Aligned is really going to be about is teaching and not even so much teaching, but just facilitating an inquiry into alignment for young people. And so for me, that always starts in the body. So starting with movement, starting with connecting with your body. If your mind and your body are disconnected, if you're just not really grounded in your body, it's really hard to create alignment everywhere else in your life. So, teaching people movement techniques, teaching people mind-body connection, and then weaving in, messages about creating a life by design. Who do you want to be? What do you want to create? Things like that. Some of it is going to be just plain old movement teaching. So when I was in Puerto Rico, some of the things I did was I went around to patients, people that were in their homes and they hadn't had a lot of consistent medical care since the hurricane. And they haven't had any physical therapy or any movement training or anything like this. And so I was going in and I was teaching these people and their families how to help their person move in a way that's pain-free, in a way that's just going to be the most effective for what they need to do, things like that. If you're at a crossroads in your life, whether that's because you're a young person going out into the world or you're somebody who's been affected by a disaster or a personal tragedy, we have the opportunity to rise in our lives and, in our bodies. The best way to do that is just to create a life and a body that is in the most perfect alignment with who you are and how you're meant to move.
That's so awesome. I was going to ask you what your advice for young people, but you certainly covered a lot of that. But is there anything else?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a lot of it. I mean, for me, the biggest thing is just I really tell people, and this is what I do. This is how I've designed my entire life is really connect with how you want to feel. Like your deepest desires. Like, do you want to feel nourished? Do you want to feel powerful? Do you want to feel abundant? Do you want to feel inspired? Whatever it is, that you want to feel. And then what are the things that will make you feel that way? What brings you alive? What's your highest excitement? And just connecting to that.
For someone who is really disengaged with that concept, like has no sense of what that's about or hasn't never felt it, how do you sort of bring that to them, or allow them to find it themselves?
Exactly. So that's really the key. Is everybody's got all the answers inside themselves. Like, I'm not going to give anything to anybody. My aim is just to kind of to guide a little bit, and so it really goes back to the connection with your body and the ability to quiet our minds. We all have these like minds they're brilliant. Our minds are brilliant, but they're also, we can get into that monkey mind state where, our brain is just blah, 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 and it's really hard to just turn that off. But for me, the best way to do that, and what I tell people to do, is to move your body. I'm sure you get it. Like, how many times have you been out on a road bike ride and you're just moving your body, you're feeling good, and all of a sudden you have this flash of inspiration or insight or something that comes to you that's not like thinking.
I'm smartest on my bike.
Totally. Yeah. So I tell people, just get out of your head and get into your body and move in whatever way feels good to you, whether that's running, biking, yoga, dancing, whatever it is, just connect with your body, and then also create that space to get quiet, so that could look like meditation. For me, it's like, after I've been moving and I've been having these insights or whatever, I'll just create that space after my movement to sit down or lay down and just take some deep breaths and really scan my body and just think, okay, how do I feel right now? Like, what do I need to know? Is my body telling me anything? And just getting quiet and calming that mind is just really the biggest first step, I think, to tapping into being able to feel what you really want, what your desires are, what you want to create, where you want to go. And it's even hard for me. Like, my thing is in the morning, what's my first instinct? Of course, freaking pick up my phone and check Facebook, right? Like everybody. But, since my meditation and movement practice is so important to me, and I know that if I don't do it, I'm going to feel chaotic. Like, I tell myself, do not pick up your phone. I don't let myself pick up my phone in the morning until I've, had my time, and so many people, like, we're so giving, we're such like a wonderfully giving society as humans. And, we want to wake up and we want to feed our children or feed our dog or check our phone, make sure we didn't miss any messages, whatever. We're just always giving our energy out to the world, which is great. But what I've really found is that if we don't fill our own cup first, we can't really actually give to others. So, for me, it's like every morning I'm going to have my time and give my body what it needs for just 15 or 20 minutes before I pick up my phone. And that's a really, really intentional thing. And I've had to work on that. So
that's cool. That's
cool. It was hard. And I still have the urge to pick it up and be like, how many likes do I have on Instagram?
Yep.
But I resist. It's all training. It's all discipline.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Is there anything else before we wrap up? I don't want to take up your entire day, which I could.
I guess the biggest thing is, like, when I tell people about what I do and my adventures and everything, the first thing people say to me is, oh, I could never do that. Like, oh, I could never do what you do, or I'm not a pro, or I'm not whatever, And like, what I tell them is, like, I am not special. Like, I'm a farm girl from Minnesota, like, I didn't grow up running up mountains. I didn't grow up like planning big expeditions in the wilderness. Like, I grew up on a farm in Minnesota, and just created what I've created because I've just followed my desires and followed my passions, and I've learned the skills along the way. And that's possible for anybody, like, whether it's adventures, whether it's starting a business, building a house, and starting a family, whatever, it's like everything seems so far away and unattainable, but all we really have to do is just take one step at a time. Like, what's the next right thing to do? And I wasn't born this way. I didn't get here overnight. Anybody can achieve whatever they want. It just starts with taking the first next right step.
Well, thank you. That's great. That's beautiful. I love it.
Thanks.
I love it. Well, I would seriously be able to talk to you all day. I hope that we can have maybe another conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime. Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you. Awesome. Have a great bike ride.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you so much. Have a really wonderful day.
Thanks. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks to you for listening. Tell your friends about the podcast. Spread the word about fantastic, strong women speaking up and doing amazing things. Please subscribe on iTunes and encourage people you know to do the same. It really does help more people find the podcast. There are some fun episodes already in the can, so keep listening. Thanks to Agnes Studio, the blog, She Rides Her Bike, Gold Mines, and Leap Strategies for super support and partnerships. I'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode. Bye-bye.
Have you ever wanted to know how to win a Formula One Grand Prix? I mean, really know. Know about the driver tactics from the cockpit, the strategy calls from the pit wall, and even the mind games in the paddock. There's a lot more that goes into winning a Grand Prix than just 90 minutes of racing. So every week on the F1 Strategy Report, we're taking a deep dive into the decisions that shape every result. Hey there, my name is Michael Laminato, and every week I'm joined by an expert guest from the paddock to talk through the big calls that won the race and the missteps that resulted in bitter defeat. Before every race, we'll look back at the previous year's result and consult the current form guide, and we'll be in your feed after every Grand Prix dissecting the outcome and what it means for the championship. So for your regular hit of Formula One analysis, subscribe to the F1 Strategy Report wherever you get your favourite podcasts. The Strategy Report is a Beer Mogul podcast on the Evergreen Podcasts network. My name's Michael Laminato, and I'll catch you after the checkered flag.